what we're doing right now by linking up all the things in the world, all the objects, all the nouns, all the people, is we're enlarging the sphere for communications, and we're bringing the entire manufactured world and all the people of the world into a new kind of culture. When we mess around with communications, we're messing around with the most fundamental nature of humanity. We're messing around with civilization. We're messing around with society at large. So what we're doing right now with increasing the speed, increasing the immediacy, increasing the reach, increasing the dimensions of communications is that we're messing around with basically the biggest thing that we can imagine. And that's why this is such a big deal. I like to use the analogy of living cells. It took about 1 billion years for the first living cell to evolve, and they were all basically the same size and shape, and then it took another 1 billion years for the next stage, which was a multicellular organism. And these are bunches of different cells that were adjacent to each other, physically proximate, because they had to be close to each other to coordinate their metabolism and reproduction. And then the third milestone was the invention of the first specialized tissue, which was a communications technology called a neuron, which allowed two cells which were distant apart to communicate. And as soon as that happened, you had basically the Cambrian explosion of all different variety of shapes of life, chameleons, and starfish, ostriches, kangaroos, were all possible because now life didn't have to be a little sphere. They could be arranged in any way we could imagine. And I think that's the milestone that we are at right now. Most of our organizations, most of our institutions, most of our companies, most of our cultural exchanges have been all basically the same size and shape because we didn't have this communication technology. And right now, we're now making communications and institutions in any size that we can imagine, any dimension. So we're seeing a kind of an explosion of possible businesses, possible games, possible ways of working, possible social institutions that we could never before even imagine. All because we now have this ability to connect people in real time or over distance or even time shifted in many, many dimensions. In mathematics as well as science, there's issues where more is different. And at some point, when you have X number of things, there actually is a change, not just in quantity, but in quality. And I think some of those issues we're seeing right now, I call it zillionics. When you have zillions of things, the entire apparatus behaves very different than even when you just have millions of things. And so when you have zillions of connections, when you have zillions of bytes, when you have zillions of bauds, when you have lots and lots of things at this scale, which is where we're headed, things just behave in an entirely different manner. We have had experiences as humans with doing things with many people. To build a bridge involves many people. To build a pyramid involves thousands of people. But these experiences have generally been ones where the number of connections between individuals and the number of people doing exactly one thing at the same time is relatively small, and so the number of people is just strung out in a serial way or in some kind of a net of relationships. And what this communication technology that is being developed allows us to do is actually to experience for the first time an immediate, instantaneous experience that has thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people all involved in concert doing something together. It's like playing a symphony where you have not just a couple hundred, 20 people, but you have maybe, again, hundreds of thousands of people. We don't have that experience before, and we're now being able to do those. And when that does, is that it's going to breed a whole new variety of experiences. someone who plays in a concert, or if you've ever been in a stadium and you've partaken in a crowd cheer, we have some hint of what those kinds of experiences are like, but those are just one type. What eNow is another example of a way of experiencing multiple minds all connected together doing something in concert. And that is a wide open field. I think there are going to be many kinds of things it will have. And it's very exciting. It's very clear that we see lots of different kinds of weird behavior when you have this kind of degree of very tightly coupled, immensely spread out, instantaneous linkages. And what I wanted to make clear is that I think there's multiple different kinds of things that happen, multiple different effects, multiple different kinds of consequences. In some cases, I think we'll see some amazingly constructive things happen. In other cases, I think there are sort of dangers, or there are ways in which things can go out of whack, oscillations and fluttering and things, which I equate with fads, which are sort of meaningless little things where the groups, what we call flash crowds. Everybody appears over here. Like the Kasparov website, which went from 0 to 5 million visits within matters of hours, and then ramped up to, I don't know what it was, 15 million, and then they disappeared and they never came back. And where did they go? Well, they all ran over to the CNN website where something was happening, or they went over to the Olympics or something. And so there was this huge crowd that seems to swarm around. Well, this is daydreaming. This is just something that's not very consequential, but it has tremendous cultural effect because we notice it. I think Moore's law is actually a consequence of communication technology and having lots of people do things in concert. It is basically, we see something that happens, which is the acceleration of technology on a very, very straight line, as if it was as this had nothing to do with human minds. It's like no matter what we do, all these people working independently on their own self-interest, they produce this effect which is just absolutely mathematically straight. And what that suggests to me is that the kind of thought that we have when we're all connected together thinking is not human-like. It's not just going to be human thought made big. It's going to be a different kind of thought, a different kind of idea. And Moore's law is basically an idea which says that on a very regular basis, every 18 months or whatever it is, computer speeds double and half by cost. And it's very, very straight. And that's not a human-like thing, because independently, none of us are acting in that way. And so the effect, the thought that we have as a kind of a hive mind is not going to resemble human ideas. It's going to be a different type. And I think we should be prepared for that. Well, I think one of the long-term trends in evolution of life, which we're part of, is that in the beginning, the first life was in an immediate contact with the environment. There was this life, and then there was outside. And as life evolved, it evolved more and more ways in which there could be derivative life, where life was in some ways living off of other life, and other life became the environment rather than the material world. So right now we have parasites, for instance, in your own gut, who are completely surrounded not by anything inert, but by your living body. They never even contact anything that's inert. And the same thing with humanity was another example where I think in the beginning we have much contact with the environment, and as society evolves, what happens is we become more social, we become more engaged, we have more connections with each other, more connections with social institutions, which are kind of a derivative. And this technology, including the stuff that eNow is doing, is part of the increased socialization, the increased derivative nature of our interactions, so that we are interacting less directly with material things and more with other things that we've made and other people. We have had collective consciousness. This is the definition of civilization. Civilization is basically a way for a group of people to have a memory, to have persistence. So we've had collective consciousness. It's called library. It's called government. But what it is that it's a very slow type. It's a very diffuse type. It's not very fast. But what we're making is we're sort of accelerating and enhancing that collective consciousness, so that we can actually have it operate in sort of real time for most of the Earth at a much larger scale, with billions of people and gazillions of artifacts involved. And so I actually think it's the other way around. I think collective consciousness is the mark of civilization and humanity. And it's the difference between just being an independent animal that has no connections. As I said before, there's no doubt that there are abuses and there are downsides to having that kind of consciousness. It can be abused. It can be used to override the individuality that people still have and should have. It can be used to destroy as well as to build up. But I don't think that it has to be. I mean, I should say, I believe that the total amount that we construct will outweigh the amount that we destroy. So there will still be abuses. But that's in the nature of things. And what we want to do is make sure that we learn how to harness this for good. And the questions we want to ask is, what are some of the new grand things that we can build or make or think using this ability to do it in real time as a world? I mean, one of the things about, we've had we've had a culture of the book. And Western civilization is basically a culture of the book. And so the kinds of knowledge that count is that knowledge which has been recorded in text and referenced in citation. It's kind of a linking to all the other knowledge. And the thing about the book is that it has an author, and therefore it has authority, and therefore it's fixed, and it has that kind of truth. We're now in a phase where we have the people of the screen. The people of the screen is a different kind of culture, and this culture of the screen is very impressionistic, it's very fast, it's hyperlinked, it's relativistic, it's a kind of truth that you assemble, it's much more networked, and fluid and very fast, constantly changing. And what we're doing is we're learning to make civilization around the screen, the culture of the screen, and taking some of the things we learned from the culture of the book into the screen. And so there's a slightly different sensibility, but part of what we're learning to do is to make use of the knowledge and information that we generate that we tend to throw away or disseminate into the air, broadcasts, TV, commercials, none of which is really saved right now or archived or referenced. And because it wasn't words on a page, and therefore we didn't think it was very valuable. But actually this is much more of the center of our culture and our identity. I mean, people don't talk about books now, they talk about movies. Okay, they talk about what was on the web or even what they heard on the radio, but they're not talking about poetry and things like that. So what we need to have, what we're making, what eNow is all about, is taking the tools and say, how do we transform and maximize the knowledge and information and good that we have in the stuff that we're not even monitoring, we're not even archiving, we're not even being able to index, we're not even being able to navigate, we're not even paying real attention to outside of this, the kind of attention that we have as spectators. And I think this is a big step, because we'll begin to sort of basically bring this into the larger context of, we'll civilize it. I mean, that's sort of what we're doing. I mean, eNow is a way of civilizing all this information that is very ephemeral. And in the past, ephemeral information was considered not important. Now we're saying, no, no, this is actually what we're doing. Let's civilize it. And I think that's what's happening right now. One of the things that I do caution people thinking about is that there is a tendency to say, well, we're in a new regime, and therefore just as there was an ideal shape for a business in the industrial age, there must be a new ideal shape in this new regime. And I think that's a little misguided because, in fact, the point of this opening up that we're doing right now is that the information technology is allowing us to have a variety of shapes, a variety of business shapes. And in fact, a lot of the old shapes will continue. A lot of the ways of having a business will still continue. There'll still be mom and pop businesses. There will still be hierarchically arranged businesses. There'll still be businesses revolving around a very charismatic and strong leader. But there will also be 2,300 other new forms and ways to arrange businesses using this technology of connection that were never before possible. And that's very exciting, and it's worth talking about what some of those shapes might be, but it's important to remember that there are many of them, there are multiple, and it's not just a single one. And that's actually the great revolution, is that we're moving into a place where businesses will have different shapes, that the commerce will not all be identical, and that's very exciting. And one of those aspects is the ability to do things in real time. This has never been possible before. This idea of being able to do things in real time changes lots of different shapes because, and it's one of the great things that this technology is allowing us to do. Real-time accounting, real-time service, real-time remembering, all these things can change and bring up new opportunities for doing business. And that's why the tools like eNow are concerned with are very potent because they have uses in 1,000 different areas where this element of being able to do things in real time, looking at very large things in real time, become very important. One of the consequences of looking at this from a complexity science point of view is that it's very clear that there is a phenomenon known as connection collapse, that you can be over-connected. What you don't want is to have to feel and respond and perceive every single event that happens in real time because you couldn't operate, you couldn't get anything done. And so I think right now we're in the giddy moment when we don't have enough of this, but I think there are limits to the amount that we want to be connected. I mean, what we don't want, I don't want to get 6 billion emails every morning. Okay, I don't want.
Close.
I know. When everybody in the world has an email account, I don't want to get, a message from them selling whatever it is that they're selling. I mean, whatever it is that they're trying to get my attention for. And the same thing. I mean, there are going to be lots of limits to this, but we haven't yet reached them, and so. The kinds of things that will happen is I think will just certainly accelerate. That's actually a minor thing, will accelerate the speed of things. But I think more importantly, I think what this does is actually brings a global sense. I think it actually expands our sense of self to very wide, to around the entire globe. So we feel as if we are on the globe together. And I think the other kind of identity thing that it changes is much more of a sense of being connected. I think there are times when we're going to want to be unconnected. And when the consequences of having this sense, this is like living in a Chinese village or something. Everybody knows everything. about you. Everything is communicated in real time. There are no secrets. There's a kind of a transparency. I think one of the reactions against that will be ways in which we kind of want to build barriers to keep out things, to not know about certain things, to not be connected. And so I think that that's going to go along with it, the managing of that sense of, well, I'm in this great big bubble and it's flowing real fast and I'm connected, but I need to disconnect. I think we can make that happen, and I think that people will need that as much as that expansion is. Here's what I think this is really all about. It's not so much about the speed. It's not so much about quantity, how fast and how many. I think the thing that this technology is bringing us and opening up is as opportunities and choices and chances. I think in the end, technology has great power, and that power can be used for good or for evil. And we can make more stuff. But I think really what we're really interested in is having opportunities or chances and choices to do things. And so what this is bringing us is more and more ways to express ourselves, more and more places in which we can have a thought, more and more ways in which we can make something but have our choice in what it is that's being made. I think what this technology is really trying to do is to weave new choices for us without taking away too many of the old choices. And that's, I think, where we're headed. That's why I think this technology is a good thing, because we're opening up possibility space. No idea is independent by itself. Every idea is basically a web of links and relations to other ideas. And when ideas are at the point, or as society moves into an area of knowledge, there's always more than one person who is working on something, and so therefore the next step happens more than once. And what's interesting about inventions is that inventions are kind of things that inhabit an idea space, and if one person has an idea, it doesn't, if the idea is only in one mind, it doesn't help anybody. And part of the process what an inventor is trying to do is trying to get other people to come into that space with him or her. And it means either they have to communicate their idea in some fashion so that other people can have that idea too, or else they have to physically make it so that people are forced to have that idea by seeing it. If an inventor is 5 steps away, way out there, even though the idea may be valid, but if nobody can get there, it's essentially as if it was uninvented, and it will have to wait until the rest of the world gets a few more steps along the way, and then it's often reinvented or rediscovered by someone else, and then they go back and they see, wow, so this guy had it, but he was just so far ahead it was no use. And so when you do an invention, having something 5 or 6 steps ahead is equal to not having invented at all. You always want to do just the next step, because that allows all the people to go along with you. And so what I'm suggesting is that invention, even when we have individuals' names attached to it, basically is much more of a social process. It's much more of something that an entire body of knowledge is moving forward, and it's not just individuals, so that we put names on them. Everybody involved in a real invention knows that there was usually 100 people in some way connected with this, and so it's not unusual that we see the same thing happening in more than one place. I think the danger is that we have a more of a homogeneous sense that difference becomes harder to do. And this is one of the reasons why I think the third world, what we call the third world, actually has a role to play as we become one huge global economy, and that is that in this kind of a world, a different idea becomes very, very powerful, because everybody's connected together, and you have this tendency for good ideas to go fast, very fast, and everybody basically has the same idea. So coming up with a different idea becomes more and more difficult, and particularly a radically different idea. And so the third world has some chance, because they are now in some ways isolated from the general trend. And so I think there's lots of opportunities for the fringes of the global economy to come up with some really great new, different ideas. So that's the downside, is that it's harder to be different. I think if we took a historical trend of the number of authors in scientific papers, we see very clearly that most of them were in the beginning just single authors, and they were dual authors, and then they were triple, and now we see papers where there's 50 or 60 authors. And it's because we're recognizing that the process of coming up with an idea actually does involve a lot more people now. And sometimes these very complicated ideas require more people. So the phenomenon of an isolated person coming up with a really new idea becomes harder and harder to do, but therefore more and more powerful when it does happen. There are many things that are often invisible in cultures, and the very act of making them visible brings them importance and transforms things. And an example of that would be the idea of the private self was something that the medieval culture did not have. And there was a moment where, I mean, nothing really changed other than people began to see that they had private lives. I mean, it was actually so public. I mean, they were so connected, they were so social that this sort of this idea of a private self was not there, even though it was there. And so they basically made a mirror through the culture, and they could begin to see themselves, and that transformed and spurred on the Enlightenment and all kinds of our modern notions of the self. And I think the same kinds of things is happening with this, where we're generating this stuff in technology and we don't see it right now, but we'll come to a point where it will become visible. And eNow is very much engaged in taking this stuff that we are generating and spending huge amounts of time in creating, but it's not being seen culturally, not being saved for one thing, not being indexed, not being linked to the rest of our body of knowledge and our civilization. And I think when we do make it visible, I think it will become extremely important, and that will become, that our cultural center will move much more towards that place. As I said, right now, our cultural center resides in the archives of very static, monumental, text-oriented books. That's what we think of libraries and civilization and the great works. We're moving into an era where the center of civilization will be much more in this fluid and dynamic medium of real-time creation, games, sports, events, thought, processes. It's very, very dynamic, very much of flux. And we don't associate that with civilization right now. We don't associate that with the high mark of humanity, but we will, because that will become the primary mode of how we think about ourselves and how we think about what we're doing. And it seems very strange, but I think it will be something where what you do in the next 5 minutes counts more than what was done 200 years ago. You know, there's no doubt that we're headed to this extreme of everything in absolutely real time, and every business has to also migrate in that same path. And tools, any tools that will allow a business to do that are going to be very, very valuable. And part of the set of tools for going in real time is the ability to monitor or to be aware or to perceive of what's happening, not just in the world, but eventually within your own company, because this is actually much slower in many ways than even the outside world. These very large companies have no idea what's even happening within their own within their own membrane. And so the tools that allow us to perceive and monitor and register what's going on are going to be instrumental, because what's not seen is not acted upon, what's not measured is not improved, and so we have to have these things, and we'll have them. And so I think every single business will be transformed by this movement to doing things in real time globally. It's not just real time, but it's global real time. And I think there will also, I have to say, be dangers in this, that we'll become completely preoccupied by real time. And if that happens, then that's also not necessarily a good thing. We need to have a balance of making sure that we also remember the long now, the seventh generation out. We have to do both. So I think there needs to be a corresponding attention paid to consequences beyond the real time, but we definitely are going towards doing things in real time, because that is actually, after all, that's the nature of life. I mean, organisms operate in real time. There's no hesitancy about that. And we're making this kind of global organism, and the only way you can have an organism is if it operates in real time. So eNow and these other tools are things that are bringing life to the planet as an organism. It has to operate in real time. It also has to have a memory and some aspect of anticipating the future beyond generations. The question is going to be, how do we manage that? Because the cells and organisms that operate in real time, but there's always a cost to that. I mean, they don't have every cell; it's not connected to every other cell. They have to manage that, and that's the really difficult part right now, is to learning to manage this huge volume of information. Yeah, everyone's connected to everything in real time, but we can't deal with it all. So this set of, well, how do we manage this becomes really, really crucial. And there's lots of ways to do this, and this is why the tools, the ways in which we measure things become really vital. The ways in which we actually connect everything to everything become really important. And we know that we're going to go in that direction. It's going to be a matter of execution, of how we do it, that is really essential.